It's Mark Lanier with your video thought for the day. And who does not like the diet lemonade at Chick-fil-A? They have that real good ice too. Gotta love it. Speaking of loving it, this week I'm going through some phrases that some might consider trite, but I'm looking at them with the question of, is it true? Is it biblically true, more specifically? And today, I'm dealing with a saying that my wife said, oh, cover that one. The saying is, everything happens for a reason. Have you heard that before? Typically, I've heard it when someone's trying to give solace to another who's going through a very difficult time. I've even heard it at funerals where people are told in the midst of grieving, well, everything happens for a reason. Now, in one sense, that's certainly true in the sense that we live in a cause and effect world, and you can find a cause for everything. My hair is a little wet right now because I just took a shower. So there was a reason for that happening. But I'm not talking about cause and effect in the world. I'm talking about specifically whether or not this is a divine principle. And I know some people who say that it is because they say God in his sovereignty has everything under his care. But I want to suggest to you that it's not a biblical expression. And it's because there's some nuance to it that I think is worth talking about. The Bible never says, Old Testament or New, that everything happens for a reason. What the Bible does say is that God is sovereign and in control. Yeah, there's no fuss about that. But that doesn't mean that everything that happens is because he wills it or wants it to happen. God is not willing that any should perish, the Bible says. And yet the Bible says people will perish. I think the closest the Bible comes is in a New Testament reference in the book of Romans. Now, Romans was written by a lawyer, Paul, and Paul had a really good grasp of the Old Testament scriptures. He had spent his life studying them. They were the law that he studied. And when I say he was a lawyer, he wasn't a lawyer in his Roman world. He was a lawyer in the Jewish world. He had studied Torah exhaustively at the feet of one of the best scholars. And so what Paul writes in the Romans letter in Romans 8:28 is something that is reflected also in the Old Testament law. I have a lot of Jewish listeners and watchers of this, and I urge you to consider this is a principle that's set out in the New Testament, but it is a principle that's deeply rooted in the Old Testament scriptures as well. What Paul says is that God works all things together for good for those who love him. Now, that doesn't mean that there's a purpose in a sense that everything happens for a reason. It means there are things that happen that aren't good things, that are bad things, that should cause us to grieve, that should cause us disappointment, that should cause us frustration, perhaps even. It's understandable at least. But what the Bible says is that God will work those things out to an ultimate good. I like to think of it as this. God is the ultimate at going green. He can recycle the garbage in your life and take that and make something beautiful and good out of it to serve and to function you and humanity. But there's a real distinction here. To impugn God and blame God for anything bad that happens is not fair. To say everything happens for a reason as if God caused the tragedy is not fair to him. Instead, It's much more fair and accurate and biblical to say that God will work in the midst of all things to bring about an ultimate good. In the end, it'll be good. If it's not good yet, you know it's not the end. Speaking of the end, this is the end of your video thought for the day, but not of this series. I'll come back with another one tomorrow. May God bless you.